Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we are taking a look at the Shirogorov F3. Now let me say, guys, that I've given quite a bit of thought to how exactly I was going to review this, and I'm still not exactly sure what's going to happen here, but I am going to go through the features. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the costs and a few other things. And honestly, I don't know how I'm going to conclude this video yet, but I guess we'll see when we get there. So listen, guys, this of course is the Shirogorov F3. And as I've already mentioned, this is a knife that as I have used it and carried it and examined it and flipped it any number of times as I've held it in my hand, I have just repeatedly said to myself, this thing is awesome, right? It feels great. It cuts great. It flips great. Like there's no point on this knife where you can go, yeah, they could have done this a little better, right? There really isn't. Now, the problem that I'm presented with as I think about how to share this with you guys is, okay, that's all well and good, but it costs a stupid amount of money, okay? I think these go for like $650, $700. All right. And right, that means you really have to ask, what am I willing to pay even for the perfect knife? Am I willing to have something a little less than perfect, all right, if it doesn't cost that stupid amount of money? Okay, and I think we absolutely have to ask that question. All right, but let me say, and initially, I've got to say this, guys, initially when I was thinking of how I would present this video, I was going to be like, this is a great knife. But if someone said, and I think it's still, I want to say this, but I have to warn you that I don't feel it as much as I once did. So listen, if someone said, I want the perfect folding knife, or I want to build the perfect folding knife, and you said, okay, we can build the perfect folding knife. It's going to cost $700 a piece. You'd go, okay, whoa, right? Maybe I don't want the perfect folding knife. Okay. However, having used this and having spent some time with it and cut some stuff with it and had it in my pocket quite a bit, I kind of want the perfect folding knife. And, I guess if this is what you have to pay for it, maybe it's something that's worth checking out. Now, I'm not going to suggest for a second that every single knife person should run out and buy a Shiro, right? For me, think of how long I've been doing this and how long I haven't had a Shirogorov, because I felt like for most of the time it would be just irresponsible to do so. I was able to get a pretty decent price on this one, so that helped a little bit for sure. Okay, it still wasn't cheap, but perhaps a little more affordable. And so let me work my way through the features of this knife, and then we'll circle back, okay, to sort of the elephant in the room, which is absolutely the cost. And by the way, it should be pointed out that this is not the most expensive Shirogorov. This is not even the most expensive version of the F3. All right. And so you could spend more and maybe get something a little more perfect. Let me also add one other point here that I think needs to be made. This knife is really, really in my wheelhouse. Okay, so while I've looked at other knives that I have said are basically perfect, the two big examples that stand out to me are the Holt Spectre, which is amazing. It really is. And the Grimsmo Rask. Those two knives were astounding in their execution. They truly were. But because of the size of both of them, they didn't sort of satisfy me in the same way that this does. All right. So I've got to be a little bit honest about my own biases at the beginning there and let you know that, yeah, I do like this for its size. All right. So having said that, it is a bigger knife. 8 and 13/16 overall, so almost 9 inches, over 3.5 inches, over 3 3/4 inches of blade actually, and it does have pretty well 4 inches of cutting edge. Notice if you measure from up here, you get a little extra cutting edge down here. So basically 4 inches of cutting edge, 5 inches of handle. It weighs in at about 5 ounces. You've got, 4¼ inches or more of handle area. So this is a big knife. This is, a knife that someone who likes the Spyderco Military or something like that, the zero tolerance 0200 or 0560. If that's your knife style, the Recon One, you'll be impressed by this. And certainly that ties into one of the reasons I like the knife as much as I do. So yeah, the size is definitely big. It's not overly heavy for its size. 5 ounces I find completely reasonable. Okay, and certainly the titanium and the G10 contribute to that nicer weight. All right, let's get into the blade here. So the blade on this guy is full flat ground drop point blade with sort of a light stonewash finish, a very fine stonewash, or maybe even a bit of a bead blast. It's certainly more reflective than a lot of bead blasted knives, so I wouldn't really call it, that's not quite accurate. Anyway, that's the finish. It's perfectly balanced, okay? It's a little over 1/8 of an inch thick, 156 thousandths to be exact. It's extremely thin behind the edge. 15 thousandths behind the edge. This thing slices like crazy. All right, it is a fantastic cutter. Now I will say it's definitely ground to cut, and so, focus you, pretty fine tip there. This is not a knife you want to pry with. It's certainly not a knife you want to drop on the sidewalk while you got it open, because you're gonna break that tip off for sure, and that would be truly sad, okay? But yeah, every time I use this knife, every time I cut something with it, I am impressed by how well it performs. It really is made to cut stuff. Okay, and that's fantastic. So the blade on this, yeah, it's amazing. Am I totally in love with Elmax steel? I like Elmax steel a lot. It's not M390. It's not the best steel out there, but it's completely great. So I'm not really going to complain about that. How about lockup and deployment? Well, we have a titanium liner lock here with a stainless steel lock bar insert. It is single row ball bearings, so it's not dual or triple or roller bearings. And Shirogorov does all of those things. If you take a look right here by the tip of my finger, they will have, a Shirogorov will have a little spot in there where they actually show, so you can see there's this one row of bearings in there indicating that this is a single row of bearings. The action on it is superb. The detent is dialed in perfectly. So once again, just like the blade, the action is amazing, right? It just is right, okay? As we move down, everything is comfortable, everything is easy. The lock bar is easy to access. The flipper tab catches your finger just right every time. It falls shut. It's hydraulic. Again, it's extremely well done. Moving to the handle, guess what? Same thing. I love the construction. We've got 3D machine titanium, the Shirogorov fasteners that we're pretty comfortable with, blue pivot collar, blue G10 backspacer, titanium liners here. It is cut out here to allow your finger to have sort of a spot to land when you flip the knife. Single position pocket clip. Lanyard hole, I guess, okay, so there is one thing I could complain about here, and that is it's gonna be really onerous. Hold on, let me get this around so you can see. It's gonna be difficult to get a lanyard through there. I mean, it can be done, but it's gonna take some effort. And so now for me, I don't care, I don't use a lanyard, but if you're a big lanyard guy, you're gonna have to fight with this a little bit, perhaps even take the back of the knife apart in order to get a lanyard through there. Outside of that, when you get this knife in hand, right, it's comfortable. It feels wonderful. It really just, molds into your hand, and you have, again, no complaint whatsoever. And like I said at the beginning, there's nothing that I can point to and say, yep, they totally blew it there, right? They just really, really put this together well. And I love the particular looks of this one. There are a number of other F3 models out there. I particularly like the micarta ones, and I've even thought about switching these scales out for micarta. Maybe someday I will do that, but now you got to think you're adding even further cost to the knife. So anyway, let me go ahead and bring in some comparisons here for you, beginning with one of the knives that I already mentioned, but which does bring a bit of a challenge, okay? So here's the Recon 1. The Recon 1's a bit bigger than the Shiro. Both of these are knives that I really, really like, that I really appreciate, that perform quite well. Obviously, the refinement of the Shiro is not here in the Recon 1, but I thought this was a knife that sort of everyone knows about, everyone's comfortable with, familiar with, has probably used before or seen before. So that I hope will help kind of get a handle on what this knife is like. Let me grab a pretty standard knife. Again, this is the Chris Reeve knives in Cosi. Very well known, very popular, very well put together. Comes in, this is an expensive knife as well, but not as expensive as this. Okay, and of course, again, a lot of people are familiar with this. A lot of people love it. Both of these are very refined, very well put together. Okay, what else have we got here? Oh, let's bring in a couple others. So here is the Kaiser Molnir. This is the best action on a Kaiser that I've ever felt. Similar in size, and this is a knife that I would sort of put in here if you're saying, Kevin, there's no way I'm ever going to own a Shiro, but I would like a knife with a really good action. This knife does have a really good action, and by the way, I'm selling it. So if you really want this, get in touch with me. Finally, I've got one other knife that, lands in kind of a similar vein for me. I like it for different reasons, but I appreciate the size and the refinement and the beauty of both of these. Now, the Shiro is certainly leaning more to the practical side of this equation, while the Beg is more to the art side of the equation. But I love both of these. They're both big. And this knife I brought in because it shows there are a few knives out there from Riot, from Wii, from a couple of other companies that do have exceptionally good actions that maybe don't feel quite as good as a Shiro, but are so dangerously close that it's hard, if not impossible, to justify the extra cost unless you really love the design, or unless, honestly, guys, I've been in this knife game for quite a long time, and I feel like I've paid my dues and have been here doing this long enough that I was due to check out a Shiro. I really needed to get my hands on one and be able to experience that for myself. So overall, all right, what are my thoughts on this knife? Do I recommend it? And here's honestly the part of this video that I've struggled with more than anything else. All right, and here's the best way that I can think to put this. If you look at this knife and you think that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I've handled some Shiros and I just love everything about them, well then yes, for you it might be worth it, right? It's sort of like going to Disney World. If you ask someone who's been to Disney World a few times, is it worth it? It's like, well, do you love Disney, or is a decent amusement park good enough? All right, because Disney's stupidly expensive too. All right. So yeah, the Shiro is stupidly expensive. But if you love it, and if you just think your collection would be complete, then yeah, maybe it's worth selling off a few of your high-end knives to finance one. Maybe it's worth skipping the next 2 knife purchases that you were going to make and put that money aside so you can buy something like this, or 3 or 4, however many it takes. All right. So yeah, or I guess there's one other person who might benefit from this. If you're one of those people who just loves and appreciates the most detailed, the most precision things imaginable, right? If you just love your Sebenza because of the detail and because of the quality of machining and all that, if you buy cars and boots and belts and everything else looking for, those extremely high levels of quality, well then yeah, it makes sense for you to buy a knife like this. It absolutely does. All right. But for the vast majority of knife fans, okay, you do not need this. All right, no one does. I don't need it. There are so many fantastic knives that cost, I don't know, between $50 and $250 or $150, whatever your budget is. There are tons of great knives that cost between $30 and $75. All right, so, I don't want anyone to feel like, well, I'm not a real knife guy, or somehow I can't enjoy the hobby as much as someone else because I don't have this or that. Complete baloney. Right? There are tons of fantastic knives. And honestly, I have, to me, there's a certain pleasure that comes from finding a budget knife that's extremely well done. Much more so than this, right? When you spend this amount of money, of course it should be perfect, right? How could it not be for that price? And so maybe that would be the other part of this discussion. Are there other knives that are charging as much as you would pay for a Shiro that aren't as perfect? And there probably are. So maybe that's the other side of this equation. While you say, yes, this is nearly a perfect knife, and it truly is, at least for me, and I like larger knives. Are there other knives that cost as much or even more that wouldn't be as good as a cutting tool, that wouldn't have as nice of action, that wouldn't have the perfect flipper tab and the perfect amount of jimping and the easily accessible lock bar and the fantastic grind on the blade and all of that? Yeah, there are. Okay, and so maybe that's something to consider as well. I don't know if I've helped you at all in this video. All I can tell you is I adore this knife. I have absolutely loved and enjoyed getting familiar with this. Every time I use it, I am happy, okay? You carry this knife in your pocket and you just smile from ear to ear because it's such a fantastic cutting tool. It really is. All right, is it for everyone? Not in the least. There's no sense in which this is for everyone. However, I hope you can still enjoy the video, even if this knife is not for you. It's sort of like, watching videos about, I don't know, anything, expensive cars or watches or whatever else. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the description box below. I'd love to know your thought process on all of this and how much you disagree with me or how much you agree with me. All right, thanks for watching. Talk to you later.